Now, for anyone who doesn't know, gimbal lock is essentially when you are animating something and the rotations no longer work correctly. This can happen in a lot of scenarios. Usually you'll see this with arms when you're animating FK arms, the shoulder area here, you're going to get gimbal lock on there. You also can sometimes see it on the wrist, but that's not quite as common unless you're doing a big animation in IK where the hand is really like moving around a lot and twisting. You also tend to see it a little bit in the head and neck, depending on how far the character is moving their head. The other area you tend to see this quite a bit is props, especially if you have a character throwing a prop or spinning a prop. So let's say we have a sword here. I just found a quick katana here, and I set it up as a typical rig, something you'd see on most props. You have your main control here that moves it around, and then you have an offset control here, which allows me to essentially change the pivot point. So now the sword can spin from more of a center point versus the handle itself, or if I wanted to, from the very tip right here. This is very good when you have a prop that has to be thrown, because when I'm holding it, I want it to rotate from the handle. The character's holding it from there. When it's spinning, it should spin from its point of balance, its pivot point. So if you look at most objects, like if I have my pen here and you balance it, that's the pivot point right there. So try not to drop it. So my pen here, you can see it's favoring this end a little bit more. There's less space there. So if I was to throw this and spin, it would spin from that point. This goes for any objects. I've got scissors here. If I was to throw this, it's not going to spin from the center of the scissors. If I balance it here, it's going to pivot from that point. You can see just a little bit behind the blade right there. Again, any object has this. What else do I have? Trying to find objects on my desk that I can balance without breaking them. I used to have my sword here, but don't have that right now. Well, anyway, you get the point. It'll spin from its balance point. As humans, we have that as well. It's usually not at the hips. It's more like the belly button area for men, a little lower for women, typically. So this is a good prop in the sense that I can move this. Now, let's say I wanted to animate the spin here. Let's do a simple spin. I'm going to imagine characters throwing this sword, and it's going to be epic, and it's going to spin through the air. And we'll do, let's say, 2 spins. So as the sword goes through, it spins through the air. Maybe actually let's do 1. That way we can see more detail here. So it goes through, spin. Nice. That looks kind of cool. But now, maybe we want to add a chaotic spin. Maybe it's not like an attack, but he just threw it and now it's going to spin around it. Like, let's say I've got the scissors here. It's going to go this way, but it's also going to spin this way as well. How do we do that? Well, that's easy enough. Let's actually make it so it tilts as well. So as it spins, it might like go off axis. So it goes in like that. Still everything's working. Nice. Let's add a spin the other way. So it's going to spin around its axis this way. What the heck? That's not what I wanted. All I wanted was it to spin and twist as it's going. Essentially, once again, doing this, but also spinning this way. So it's just going in this nice, like end over end, but also rotating. This is also, let's say I want to attack and the blade is like this. I want to go and arc it in that sense. Let's go back to the screen here. Let's just do that simple thing where it's going to come down and I want it to maybe hit at like a 90-degree angle. Okay, that works pretty well. But what if he's going to go and do an uppercut? Like that. What the heck? That whole rotation is gone. Everything that happened is now weird. The tip of the sword is going in the wrong direction. Why? What is happening here? Well, essentially we are getting gimbal lock. Gimbal lock is when two axes merge and suddenly become, basically they move in the same direction. The way you can see this is by setting your rotation manipulator to gimbal mode. And the way gimbals work, this is 3 axes. You've got X, Y, and Z. There's also always an order to the way they move. So what that means is if I rotate X right here, you'll notice in this case, it doesn't affect anything else. X rotates, nothing else changes. If I rotate Y, the Y axis is moving the X axis. And it's also spinning the sword. If I move Z, everything moves together. That's the way gimbals work. There's always an order to them. Now, what's happening is as we're spinning in Y, we're twisting the sword around. We reach a point where you can see here, the X and Z axis both do the same thing. Let's kind of move it just slightly off so I can select them. If I take the X axis, I get that chopping motion. If I move the Z axis, I get the same chopping motion. I've essentially lost an axis of rotation. I have no way of properly rotating it the other way, back towards camera here. It's gone. Now I could switch my object manipulator or my manipulator back to object mode and whoop, there we go. Easy. But if you actually look at the values here in the channel box, notice how they're all going crazy. Because essentially what Maya is doing a bunch of crazy math to just get this object to move in this direction. And that crazy math is where we get issues. Because essentially, the in-betweens, the way to get to that is going to be all wiggly. It's not going to make sense. And we get this weird rotation where it should just go straight down and over, but instead we get that big arc in there, or sometimes we get this horrible wiggle. The computers can only process one line at a time, hence there has to be an order to which channels rotate first, and the gimbal phenomenon and gimbal lock is created exactly. So, how do we avoid this? Well, there's 2 main ways that we can avoid this. Well, there's a few different ways we can avoid this. But today we're going to talk about 2 of them. The first way is we separate the rotations. Instead of having one control that deals with all of the rotations, we split them. So we have separate controls that deal with one rotation at a time. What this does is it avoids this competition of all of these attributes trying to move this control or this object to do one thing. So, how would we do this? Well, I've done this before in one of the previous streams, which I'll be re-uploading as soon as I can, which was this spin toss here where I have a character with a staff, throws it in the air, and there you go. Throws it in the air, catches it, and spins it. In order to animate this, I created a constraint setup that allows me to spin this and twist it in the air without getting any gimbal lock. And you can see it here. Essentially, if we look at the main control for the object, let's see, which one is it here? Not that one. It is this one, I think. Yeah. So look at the rotations on this control here. See how they don't make any sense? The rotate Z, which in this case is the main spin, it's spinning counterclockwise, I think. Is it counterclockwise? Yeah. The object is spinning counterclockwise in one direction the whole time. But if we look at the curve, it's going down, then up, then down, then up, and down. It makes no sense. It's reversing direction. That's what the gimbal lock is doing. It's making this curve that is trying to make things work. It makes no sense. And that is happening on all of the rotation curves. None of them make any actual sense. So what I did was I created 2 new controls. In this case, I just needed 2 of them. One to handle the rotation X, and you can see There's the rotation X. In this case, that's the lean forward, lean back of the rod. And then one to handle the rotate Z. And if we look at this curve, look at that. It's just spinning in one constant direction. It slows down right here, speeds up right there, but it's not having to change direction. It is handling one rotation, and that is it. Just the spin. So, how do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple for the most part. The big thing is that we have to be careful of one specific thing, which I'll go over in just a second. But let's go over the basic creation of this. Essentially, what we're doing is we're creating a new gimbal, but one that we have full control over every element of. So, the way I like to do this is I just use NURBS circles. So I'm going to make a NURBS circle here. I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to make it quite a bit bigger so we can differentiate it. So we have one here, then I'll make another and another. And these are going to control our individual rotations. One is going to control X, one is going to control Z, one is going to control Y. That's it. Now, when you create these, you could do it so you could just have one extra control. You could have it so you have two like I did in the previous shot. I just needed X and Z. Sometimes you'll need it to do all three. Very rarely, I will say, but sometimes that happens. So we've got this here. How do we set this up? Well, the first thing is I created these circles. Now I'm just going to select them all, go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. This makes sure that they don't have any different values in here. Everything's reset. I also like to go to Edit, Delete by Type History. This clears out any history, just resets them essentially. The other thing is name them. Now, in this case, I'm going to call this rotate. Actually, let's not rename them yet. I'll rename them in just a second, but keep in mind you will need to rename them. The reason why is we'll get a little bit more out of it if we don't right now. So the simple way to set this up is I will take my inner ring right here and I will constrain my prop to it. So I'm going to take the inner ring, then the control here, go to constrain, parent, make sure maintain offset is turned on, and add that. Now as I rotate this, it moves the sword. Now I will take this ring and I will parent it, not constrain it, edit parent to the next ring there. So you select the child, then the parent, and you can hit P on the keyboard to do that. Then the middle ring to the outer ring. Boop. Like so. Now, we've essentially got a gimbal set up where I can take one curve there, the other curve there, the other curve there. Voila. That's the basic setup of it. Now, how is this any different from rotating it just with this control? I get this control there, I select this, I rotate this, and I get everything. How is this any different? Well, we have a little bit of extra control now that we've separated everything out. And in these cases, what I like to do is I will lock an attribute. So just without thinking about it, let's say I have this inner control. I want that to control, let's say, the spin. So I want that to only control the rotate X here. Well, I'm going to take my rotate Y and rotate Z, right click, and just go right here, lock selected. Now, when I rotate this, it only spins in that one direction. The middle one, let's say I just wanted to do the rotate Y. So I take my X and Z, lock selected, and then this last one will do the rotate Z, so doot doot, lock selected. Right there. Now I have one control that does my rotate X, another that does my rotate Y, and then another that does my rotate Z. There we go. With this, I can now, let's do that animation again. So this is going to spin, and actually make sure I key everything. Okay. So this control is just going to spin forward, like so. So we get that spin there. This control is going to control my twist. Okay, so as it comes down, we're going to take this, rotate Y, and oh, what the heck? What's going on? It just weirdly snapped. Okay, let's undo that. Let's try that again. Rotate that, and what the heck? It's not rotating correctly. It's arcing down instead of spinning. What's going on? This is a common issue, and it's technically what's happening with the gimbal lock is even though we've created this setup, we've run into our own gimbal lock. Why? Why is that? We did this whole setup. We're not supposed to run into more gimbal lock. All of this boils down to regular gimbal lock as well as this setup boils down to rotation order. What happens is that we're trying to use two rotations that are fighting against each other. We need to make sure that our rotation order, the way that rotations interact with each other, do not hinder each other. So essentially, let's kind of show this visually here. As I'm rotating this control down and forward, the next control, you can see this is the one that handles the spin. This is the Y control right there, is now becoming misaligned with the sword. If I go this way, the rotate Y is just going to spin the sword around like that. That's not what I want. The rotate Y is supposed to spin it like in a screwdriver type sense. That's not what I wanted. Well, I just need to make sure that my rotations happen in the order I want. In this case, the rotate Y needs to happen first. The twist this way needs to happen, and then we can twist it forward and back. So let's just quickly do that. I can adjust my controls right here on the fly. So I'm going to unlock my rotate Y on the first control, and then lock my rotate X. And then the next most important control is going to be the X. That's going to be the chopping motion. So let's see. Do I want that to be on this control here? Well, let's do a quick test. Let's unlock this. And I'm going to go over more details on all of this in just a second. Kind of rehash it all. So we've got the rotate Y. Perfect. Now that spins. I can now use this control to go like that. And look at that. I have my ability to spin this, no problem. Now I also want the ability to adjust the arc of this. Does this work? Yep, that works pretty well. So I think this order will be good. This rotation here is going to be very minor. I essentially just want a chopping motion like that, and then this to create a slight adjustment if I need to. Now let me actually just test that the other way. It's always good to test. What happens if I instead use this to rotate in Z, and then this to rotate in X? That actually works better. See here, now I can get that clean swipe through while also doing this. So let's set this up and I'll explain the way we typically want to think about the rotation orders. So this is going to be our rotate Z. So I'm going to lock these two. And then the outer one is going to be our rotate X. So lock these two. And let's do our animation once more. So key all that. And let's just make sure that's all zeroed out. Interesting. Oh, it's because I locked this attribute with some keys on it. Don't do that. Make sure you reset your attributes. Okay. And then same thing here. Okay, so it's all reset. Cool. Now let's do our same animation. So I want this to arc downwards. I've got this control. Spin. Perfect. Now, that works. I want it to twist in the air. I can use this one, twist it, and let's go for a full 180. And look at that. Still working correctly. Now I want to add a swoop to it. So as it comes down, it goes off to the side here. Oh, and I didn't key it on the right frame, so that didn't help. Let's just go a little bit there. Look at that. Nice clean arc. No weird wiggle, nothing like that. Yeah, coin flips. Anything that has a flip or a twist in midair, this is going to be your best friend and it's going to help avoid these crazy motions. So, we got it to work. Yay! Why? How do we think about this so that it works consistently and we can think through this? Essentially, rotations have an order to them, like we talked about before. And the rotation order is very, very important to make sure that things don't go crazy like we saw. In this case, let's actually name these. This is my Y curve. This is my Z curve. And then this is my X curve. We have a rotation order of Y, Z, X. Y is first. It has no influence on anything but itself. You can see I moved this curve, nothing else is moving. Z is in the middle. It has a connection between the Y and the Z. And then the X controls everything together. That rotation order is important. And the way we always think about it is you think of where you're going to rotate the most from. What is going to be the most important rotation in your motion? That should either be the first or last rotation. So in this case, it should be in this case, the spin. Let me actually write this down. So we've got, goodbye drawings. We've got X, Y, and Z. If we want to do this, and we know that X is our biggest rotation, X should either be, we've got that. X should either be first or last. That is going to be your most important. What is the other rotation that's most important? In this case, the Y. That's our second most important. That's going to give us a spin. It's going to be a big extreme spin. Well, we know that it should be either last or first because it's also very important. But how is it going to interact with it? In this case, I want it to spin forward and back and then corkscrew. The corkscrew is following the main spin. That tells me that, well, it should follow. If I put it over here, that means Y, you always kind of look at it this way. The thing furthest right is the lead object. The Y is controlling everything else. That's not what I want. The Y is just an extra little spin. It's going to be spinning a lot, but it's the extra bit, not the main spin. So Y goes over here. I want X to be the lead spin. And then Z, that's the one we're using the least. It's just a little twist. That goes in the middle. You put the one that you use the least amount of rotation of, or that's going to be just a little extra, in the center. Exactly. It's high school math, pretty much. So this allows me to get those nice clean rotations very easily. That's what I did here. We have Y, Z, X. Now, you can create a system like this. This is one way I like because it really separates everything and makes sure that nothing will ever interact in a weird way. So I do like these setups. But you can actually do that with just the sword. So let me see. I'm going to duplicate this. It's not going to work quite right here. So let me just set this up again. So this is constrained to this. Okay. So we've got this set up here. I can change the rotation order on an object. So if I take this sword here and go to the attribute editor, under the main attributes right here, there's my rotation order, X, Y, Z. X is the main, or one of the most important ones, but it's being affected by everything else. Y, in this case, is the least important. It's being put in the middle. That's not quite right, because that's going to really throw a lot of things off. And then Z, the one we're using the least, it's just a little twist like this, is last, which should be one of the most important positions. So if I know exactly what kind of motion that I'm going to be doing in my shot, where the sword is going to be coming down here, twisting a little bit, but then spinning a lot as it's coming down, I can switch this. So let's switch it to my Y, Z, X rotations. Now, I should be able to get the majority of that same animation just with this. It's not going to be perfect, but it could help quite a bit. So this is one way you can do things. Now, in this case, because I have everything separate, I would probably put it X. I would probably put it X, Z, Y. The reason for this is because I don't have separate controls that are now all unique, I do have to be careful that I don't put it in a way that, and this is just testing it out, as I twist it down here, I can still spin it like this. See how that works? If I put it the other way, which was Y, Z, X, as I go up and down here, see how the Y is twisting my up and down around? I don't want that. So just be careful. Test things out. With a separate system like this, you will reverse the order sometimes. When they are together, it will be the main thing that you rotate first. So in this case, X, Z, Y. It's still not going to be as reliant though as this one. Splitting your axes is better because no matter what, as soon as I have whatever order I want, let's put it X, Z, Y here, and then reset everything. Zip. If I rotate this, there will come a point, see that, where all the attributes are now adjusting in a really weird way, and you start getting all of this crazy math going on. So rotation orders are good for quick fixes for certain things, and they will fix a lot of potential big gimbal lock, but it is not a cure-all. A separate system like this will help to really separate everything. So hopefully that helps there. So leading must be last, and the second used most rotation will be first. Yes, in a way. It's the rotation that the two most important rotations are on the ends, but if you're doing a separate system like I am here, the last one, the X, is going to be the global control. So that should be at the end. On a singular system where everything, all the rotations are kind of locked together here, you would want the control that will not take influence from others. So in this case, the X, I want this quick motion right there to be the first one, because that's going to allow it to move unimpeded by everything else. It's just going to spin on its own. It's not going to do any other craziness in there. It also depends on the situation, how much spin you're doing on each control. So there's no like one solid rule for this. As long as you kind of keep those guidelines of importance, the two ends are the most important. The middle is the least important. That's the one that is like, it's just a tiny rotation, a little nudge. That should go in the middle. The other two, it's dependent on the situation. Let's see, can you show the hierarchy in the panel? Do you mean in the channel box here? You can by creating a attribute. So you can add your own custom attribute and connect it to the rotation order right there and have a switch. right through there. I believe Animbot also has a quick button that quickly allows you to switch the rotation order very easily. You can also key the rotation order, so you can change it mid-shot if you have to. Now, A to the J. That's a good question. How do you change the control curves here? So let's say we've got our shot here, and we've got this shot spinning. We've got all of this stuff. Let me get rid of this extra control here. That's just annoying. So we've got all of this going exactly how we want, but see how everything is just the same color? What if I wanted to color this so it's very easy to see that this is the y-axis, this is the z, this is the x? Well, what you can do is open up your attribute editor, and under object display for the object, so I'm selecting the y here, go to drawing overrides, turn on enable override, and change the color index here. So I'm going to change this. If this is the y-axis, let's put it to green. It's green. Let's take this one, enable override. This is the z-axis, so let's put that as blue. There we go. Enable override. This is x, so that should be red. Voila. Now I have a set of controls that I know exactly which axis each one of them is doing. Right there. And that's actually what I did on this shot, where you'll notice I have the x-axis and the z-axis. Very clear, nice to see. And in this case, because I know the z-axis is my main rotation, you can see I can just tweak that and get the perfect spin that I want in my shot.